tonight, but he did send a message.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us for this important meeting to discuss what's going on with our Office of Community Police Oversight and our Community Police Oversight Board. This board and this office was established for you to have a voice and to have a place where you can share your concerns about any complaints as relates to your interaction with the Dallas Police Department. This office is not anti-police, it's to work with the police to make sure that we have accountability and oversight for our police department. We look forward to this important conversation. Your voice is critically important in this process. Thank you, and let's have a great discussion tonight.
Now we're gonna turn you to the hands of the Police Oversight Chair.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jesuorobo, and I'm McClary Jr., and I'm the chair of the Dallas Community Police Oversight Board. How many of you in this room are familiar with the Dallas Community Police Oversight Board? Raise your hand. Raise your one high. I can't see any hands. Okay. How many of you are familiar with the Citizen Police Review Board? Raise your hand. How many of you are wondering what happened to the Citizen Police Review Board? Raise your hand. How many of you don't care? Raise your hand. How many of you are here to learn about the Community Police Oversight Board and the Office of Community Police Oversight and why we're here to serve you and how we can serve you? Raise your hand. All right, good. We got everybody's hand raised for the most part. That's great. Okay. Again, my name is Jesuorobo, and I'm McClary Jr. I've lived in the city of, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for over 20 years. I am a Louisiana resident. Go Saints, who dat? And I just want to say it is too hot to have a suit on in Dallas right now. But I thank you all for coming out, and beside me is the director of the Office of Community Police Oversight. That's Reverend Tonya McClary. And that's one of the new things, because the Citizens Review Board, one of its downfalls was that it had absolutely no power. And many of you didn't even know that it existed, so that's another issue within itself. It was a board designed for members of the civilian community, whether you were a resident or not. And when I say resident, you don't even have to be a resident of the U.S. in order to file complaints. But that board was available for citizens to file a complaint. But you couldn't file a complaint directly to that board. If you had an interaction with a police officer that was not to your satisfaction, you had to file a complaint with the police department. And guess how you did that back when the Citizens Review Board was around? Who knows? Exactly. There was no form to fill. You have to walk into the police department and tell them that you wanted to file a complaint. And depending on which station you went to, they might try to dissuade you from filing a complaint. And what if, by some strange reason, you forgot to pay a traffic citation? And you walk into the police department to file a complaint? What probably would happen? Yeah, you probably wouldn't go home that night. So that's how complaints were filed. When Chief Hall came, Chief Hall actually created a form that you could file a complaint. So when did Chief Hall become Chief of Police in Dallas? What year was that? Somebody help me out. 2016. How long has Dallas had a police department? So the history of Dallas Police Department, you didn't get a form to file complaints until 2016. What does that say? Well, historically, Dallas had, for a city this size, Dallas, the number of complaints on average that Dallas had was extremely low. Historically low. but there was no form to file a complaint. And if you went into a police department and filed a complaint, sometimes they would talk you out of it. So, is the reason why there was such a low number of complaints, was it because of the fact that Dallas Police Department is state of the art, they're world class, and every encounter that we have is generally a positive encounter? Is that the reason why complaints are so low? Okay, yeah, okay. So we're talking about the fact that you couldn't file a complaint. You had the Citizen Review Board. Now, the way it worked is that if you filed a complaint with the police department and they investigated this complaint and they came back with a result that wasn't something that you were satisfied with, you could appeal it to the Citizens Review Board. The Citizens Review Board would then review your complaint at a board meeting and determine whether they concurred with the police department or if they felt that they didn't agree with the result. That's great that you have a board that can determine it, that can disagree with the police department, right? Y'all are seeming too excited. So guess what happens if they don't agree? They send it back to the police department to reinvestigate. So what do you think normally happens in those situations? Exactly. But that board also had the power to do independent investigations. However, there was a panel of 3 police officers from another jurisdiction that if the police department, if the board wanted to do an independent investigation, they'd have to get a majority vote from those police officers there. So that's great, you get an independent investigation if you get permission from some police officers. But say you get permission to do the independent investigation, then guess what? Independent investigations are not free. You have to hire somebody to do them because the independent investigation is something done outside of the police department. But you just have this board, there's no office or staff to support it. Did I mention that? Oh, I forgot. The board did not have staff or an office to support it. They usually had an admin that rotated in and out that was able to get the meeting materials from the board. But there was no staff, no budget. So if there's no budget, guess what happens with the independent investigation? No, you don't get an independent investigation. So you got all these hurdles. You got a hurdle to file a complaint. You have a hurdle to get that complaint fair. Well, first you got a hurdle to even get a form to file a complaint. So that's the first hurdle. Second hurdle is actually filing the complaint. Third one is getting it reviewed by the board if you don't agree with the disposition of it. And then fourth is what happens if the board doesn't agree. So you got 5 different issues here that are really stopping you from providing any type of change to the Dallas Police Department, right? All right, so starting in 2018, a group of individuals started working with Chief Hall and the city manager, Broadnax, in order to bring oversight to the city of Dallas, bring true oversight to the city of Dallas. And what was agreed upon was an ordinance that created the Office of Community Police Oversight, that is Director McClary leads that office, and the Community Police Oversight Board, which I'm the chair of. So, great, now we have this, but what does it mean? All right, so now with the Office of Community Police Oversight, you don't have to go to the police department to file a complaint. You can go to the Office of Community Police Oversight. You can pick up a form. There are forms in recreation centers, there are forms in libraries, and we're going to put them in some other public places as well, and at the police department. But you can file a complaint with the Office of Community Police Oversight. You can do it online. You can do it by telephone. You can do it by email. And you can still go to the police department if you want to file your complaint. But guess what happens if you come to the Office of Community Police Oversight and you forgot to pay that speeding ticket? Guess what happens if you come to the Office of Community checking to see whether there's a warrant. Not that anybody in this room would ever have warrants. Everybody here pays their traffic tickets, so we don't have that problem. But just in case, not only that, but what if you feel intimidated by the police department? What if you had bad experiences with policing and it just makes you nervous to go to the police department? Well, Director McClary's office takes that fear out of your concern. One, you come in and you file your complaint. It's discreet. Nobody knows what you're there for. Nobody knows that you filed a complaint. It's a safe space. And what Director McClary is going to make sure of is that complaint gets reviewed. So we've talked about two of the obstacles, right? We've gotten past the form, we've gotten the complaint to an office that can get it over to the police department. Now, one of the things we're still working on, and I think that's where the community's have to come, you're gonna have to step in on this one, is that complaints are still reviewed by the police department. However, Director McClary makes sure that her voice is heard when complaints are being reviewed to determine whether there's a complaint that the police department might feel, hey, this is not worth us investigating. Director McClary can say, no, that complaint is valid and needs to be investigated. But guess what happens if the police department still feels that they won't investigate? Guess what happens then? In the old world, what would happen if the police decided not to investigate a complaint?
Nothing.
So in the new world, Director McClary has the power to do an independent investigation if she feels as though this complaint needs to be investigated. So that's another change we have, right? She'll do an independent investigation, and then she'll bring the results of that investigation to the Oversight board, my board. We'll review it, and then she'll send those results to Chief Garcia. So what if the police department, they decide they don't want to investigate this complaint, and Director McClary also agrees that, you know, it shouldn't be investigated. But what if you feel it should? What happens then? Yeah, we don't have to appeal, you just bring it to the board. So in that instance, you bring it to the Oversight board. We meet every second Tuesday at 5:30. Oh, that's another problem with the old board. They met every second Tuesday at 1:30 in the afternoon. So who actually would be attending a meeting at 1:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday? Retired. Right. There wasn't that many retired people in that either. All right, so we changed to go to the first action when the board was ready. We changed the meeting to 5:30 so that you could attend if you needed to. So Director McClary doesn't agree that it should be investigated. Police department doesn't believe it should be investigated. You feel it should, so you bring it to the board. The board will review your complaint, and then we will determine whether it should be investigated or not. And if we determine that it should be investigated, we will direct Director McClary to do an independent investigation. So, but I forgot about, remember we couldn't do independent investigation, so we had to get that panel of police officers to vote on it, and then we had to cross that hurdle of money, right?
Yep.
Well, since we have officer support, since we have a budget and we have staff to do the investigation. We have an investigator that's on our staff that does the investigation. And we don't have to answer to a panel of police officers from another jurisdiction. We don't answer to the police department because we're not a part of the police department. So we determine whether we will have an independent investigation by the 15 members of the board voting. Majority vote, independent investigation. So that is a few of the powers that we have in regards to complaints. But what we also have is the power to make recommendations. how many of you remember, what's the date, 4/20? Is that, anybody know, familiar with that date?
Texas Independence Day.
On April 20th, that's when Chief Garcia changed the policy on arrests for possession of small amounts of marijuana. Because we all know that marijuana usage is pretty much equal across races, but for whatever reason, well, we know the reason. Black people tend to get arrested and convicted at higher rates for something that's about as dangerous as a drink. Now,
3 times.
yeah. Thank you. So one of the things we did as a board is that we met with District Attorney Cruzo. Cruzo does not prosecute low-level possession of marijuana if there aren't any other charges attached to it. So if marijuana is found small amounts, they have to test it because of the fact that if it's hemp, it's not illegal. So you have to test to determine whether it's hemp or not. So by not prosecuting and not testing small amounts of marijuana, that saved the city of Dallas about $500,000 or whatever. $500,000 is a lot of money, right? Also, with marijuana arrests, you normally take 4 police officers off of a beat for a number of hours for arrests like that to be processed. So what could 4 police officers be doing as opposed to dealing with someone who has enough marijuana for just themselves? What could those 4 police officers be doing?
Policing the neighborhood.
Exactly. So we brought this to the attention of the city council. We gave a recommendation for the city council to tell Chief Hall not to arrest those with possessing small amounts of marijuana and to instead give them a citation. That didn't really go over good with the city council. They stated, who are y'all to tell us what to do? I was like, well, we're just an advisory board and we give recommendations. And what you do with those recommendations, that is on you, but that's our job to make recommendations. So, went nowhere. But when Chief Garcia was hired, we talked to Chief Garcia about how we felt about low-level marijuana arrests. And I think maybe a month after he was in office as the chief, he made the change. So we helped with that change. But that's not one of the most important changes that we helped with. What have you noticed within the last year about policing if someone in Dallas is the victim of use of force and it's a loss of life? Or a loss of life, because what have you noticed within the last year? No? Yeah, you probably would. No. What you have noticed is you're seeing videos on the news now. Videos are being released.
Yeah, sooner.
Yeah, videos are being released, and how long is it, Director? Is it 72 hours?
Yeah.
72 hours. Videos are being released. Who do we have to thank for that? Not me, but Director McClary had a lot to do with that. She had a lot to do with that. That's something that she had pushed for, and due to the civil unrest and a lot of the protests that were going on, that caused the police department and city manager to speed up some reforms they had been working on. So, people talk about, the value of protests or the no value of protests. I can tell you that had it not been for the protests last year, we probably would not have that policy. That policy probably would not be effective now. But thanks to the community, thanks to you, thanks to Director McClary, we now have a clear-cut video release policy. Prior to that, the video release policy was only if the chief felt that the video should So we have that, let's see, we talked about reforms. We can provide reforms, we can provide reform recommendations to the police chief, the city manager, or the city council, whoever we deem fit. And that's the board and or Director McClary. That's something new as well. So where do we get these recommendations from? Get them from you. Who better to give us feedback on changes that need to be made with the police department than the people who are being policed? I see no other way to get recommendations. I don't know about you. So that's also why we're here. And that's actually why we're here tonight, because we want to hear from you. We want to get some feedback from you. If there are recommendations that you feel need to be made to the police department, we want to get those recommendations. If you want to talk about how you feel that you're being policed in your communities, whether you've been over-policed, whether you've been under-policed, that is your opportunity to give us that information as well. And I am going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over to Director McClary. Before I do that, do you have any questions of me? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I answered the question of you exactly, but you made a statement about, I have questions, but I'm not gonna ask them. But you made a statement about the police's, and their video cameras, right? Does the city of Dallas require all police officers to wear a, camera when they're out in the, in the city of policing?
So, yes. However, all of the officers don't have cameras yet. They're still working to get cameras for every officer. But for those who have cameras, when they're answering a call, when they're on the beat, the camera is supposed to be on. But if they're going to a call, if they are interacting with civilians, yes, the camera should be on. Yes, sir.
When are they required to turn their camera on?
They're supposed to turn their camera on as soon as they, so you got the car cam, the dash cam, but they're supposed to turn their camera on as soon as they are heading to a call. As soon as they are approaching the call, they should have that camera on. So if I get out of my car and I'm approaching you, I need to be my camera needs to be on.
So, are they supposed to turn their camera on when they exit the vehicle or when they approach it? I mean, gray area there.
Now, I'm not specific on the details. I don't want to get in here and lie, but the camera should be on when they're interacting with you. And if the camera is not on, then that's a violation of policy.
How do we know if the camera's on or not? Is there an indicator, a light, or anything like that for us to be able to know as the caller or whomever?
So the cameras are, they have a docking station that they dock it, and it downloads all of the video from the day. And so they would match that up with any calls that they had as well. Meaning, say for instance, I'm driving up to a call, I got my dash camera on, and then I get out and handle it, but you don't see anything after that, then that's an indication that the camera wasn't on. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, Judge, you mentioned something about under-policing and over-policing of neighborhoods. I would say my neighborhood is under-policed, but I don't know that to be a fact. Is there somewhere that you can get statistics that shows how well your neighborhood is being policed?
Director McClary?
So I'm gonna put up, we have a colleague in the audience, I want to just give a shout out to his organization, Datapolitan. They did a policing and data projects, I think, Richard might have some answer. There is a public portal, you can actually literally go to the website of the Dallas Police Department and get certain data on your neighborhoods, but Richard, I don't know if you wanna add anything?
I do. Thank you for the introduction. I wish that data was easy. It's not. And if I hear what you're saying about it, it's very much just like the data that's available in the open data portal is just police officer X responded to call Y in this location. So it would need to be kind of looked at on a larger level to talk about policing trends. And like, it might surprise you that Dallas Police Department doesn't really tell you how long it takes to respond to a call. It'll be like, oh, we got this call, and then we showed up, and then we left, and it's like, you have to do a lot of math to kind of figure out how fast they're responding, which I assume is probably like one of the concerns, right? How fast they're responding, are things going unanswered, and some of the other trends, like, that would be really important. I wish that was like in the CompStat and like, that the police department uses to make their decisions, it's not. And I think it takes community groups like this pushing that to say like, hey, you have the data, you have the ability, why aren't you telling us these things?
And one of the things we are working on with the police department is we are working on their data being more transparent. It is really not easy to navigate the open portal data. We're not even sure that that data is accurate. So when people go there, are you actually seeing what you think you're seeing? So I know that Chief Garcia has a lot of concern about the data, and so one of the things we'll be working with is that department to try to make the data more transparent. We're hoping that they actually have a more living dashboard where you can actually see some things real time, but that is a problem.
So when it comes to the investigator, that you were talking about, that you investigate to see whether someone's, submits a claim or complaint. Is that investigator a third party who's not associated with the Dallas Police Department at all? There's no bias there?
No, he's not a member of the Dallas Police Department. He's a member of Director McClary's staff. I'm sorry, I have a question over here. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my question is, I'm gonna go back to the camera, okay? So when the police officer exits his car, does anybody monitor or enforce to make sure that the cameras are on? Or if they're turning them on, they get ready to turn them on?
No, they have a specifics policy. And so when they're reviewing the camera footage, when they put the camera back on the docking station and all of that data is downloaded and they're matching up video with calls and responses, things of that nature, they'll know right then and there whether there's a policy violation or not.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to piggyback on what she was asking, so as a layperson, you won't be able to tell if the body camera's on.
Like you won't know if the body camera is on. You have to ask to get the video. You have to ask for the video.
So they have different models of them. Some of them, it is obvious that it's on because there's a light on it and the light will be flashing, meaning it's recording.
Okay.
They are upgrading to different models of the body worn cameras. A lot of police departments are actually moving to cameras now that like automatically come on, like as soon as your light's on, your camera comes on. So there's different models of the Axion camera, but some of them are obvious because the light will be on and you'll be able to actually see it recording.
All right, one more question, then we'll turn it over to Director McClary. And we'll have time for more questions too, but I want Director McClary to be able to speak as well. You have one more question?
Yeah, this may be, I'm not sure if it's something you can answer, maybe the police department, how often, is there only a review of the body cam video if there's a complaint? Or is there random review of body cam video? Because, I mean, how would you know that there are violations if someone doesn't complain?
That's a good question.
So as part of the body worn camera policy, supervisors are supposed to do random checks of their supervisor's body worn camera, so there is supposed to be a viewing of the video cameras. So obviously if a complaint is filed or an incident filed, obviously those will be pulled, but the supervisor is supposed to do checks of their supervisor's body worn camera.
All right, everyone, I'm gonna stop running my mouth. I'm gonna turn it over to Director McClary.
So the chair actually already said a lot of the stuff probably that I'll say. But I always like to tell people, I feel like I'm kind of like a 40-year dream in the making for the civilians of Dallas. And you might notice that the chair and I, every now and then I'll slip up, but the chair and I always use the term civilian. And that is because when you use the term citizen, that leaves out a whole group of people. Especially in a city like Dallas, we have a lot of undocumented people that are not a U.S. citizen, and I don't ever want people to feel that whatever country that you're from and you might be undocumented, that you cannot file a complaint and that your rights should be violated. So I'm very specific to use the term civilian, because I know when I say citizen, it leaves out a whole group of people. And when you were talking about under police know, those sometimes are the areas that are either under police or sometimes over policed, because they know that they're not gonna call the police, right? If I got a house full of people and most of us are undocumented, you come in and do some crazy stuff, I'm not gonna call the police, right? Cause I don't wanna bring attention to my family or friends or whatever. So in a lot of those communities, the police, they often are over policed, and we don't often find out about it just because of fear and concern. So that's why you ever hear saying, why do they say civilian instead of saying citizen? That's the reason. And also, as the chair said, you don't have to be a resident of Dallas to file a complaint. You know, this is a popular city. People come to Dallas all the time for vacation, especially now that COVID is, although we don't know what's going on with COVID, but when people thought it was opening back up, the city was opening back up. And so we have people that have come here for tours. You got college students. It's a big city with a lot of universities. And so you don't have to actually be a quote unquote resident of Dallas to file a complaint or bring us something. So we get complaints from people sometimes that are just passing through, from students, from other things that are going on. So one of the things that I like to talk about in terms of what my role is, I'm the very first police monitor for the city of Dallas, and the director of the Office of Community Police Oversight. And so it's a big job. We're the 9th largest police department in the country. And so I feel a lot of responsibility, and I feel like whatever trends I'm setting in my office, my colleagues in other parts of the country that work with smaller departments are gonna be looking at me and saying, hey Tonya, what are y'all doing in Dallas? So as I'm building this office, I feel like a lot of responsibility to try to do it right and to try to get things right. But just a little bit of the history. So I literally started the last week of February, and then 2 weeks later we were in a pandemic. So I had this whole vision of like running around the city of Dallas and meeting all of you people, right? Going to every single district and doing all this. And we just haven't had a chance to do it. So I feel like this is like our coming out time in a way, where we're just starting to get out. But when I look back at what the office and the board achieved, even in a pandemic in the first year, it was really awesome. So I don't want to go through everything, but I would encourage you to look at this. This really gives you, I didn't talk about the stuff about the office, but this gives you just a snapshot of all the accomplishments this board has done. And I'll just say a little bit about the accomplishments of the office. So one of the first things we did was get that video release policy. When I came in, I was like, that's ridiculous, a city this large, how can you not release video policy? Luckily, Chief Hall was on the same page. She also wanted video release, so I actually co-wrote that policy. Went back and forth, did a lot of back and forth between the police, the city attorney's office, my office, back and forth, co-wrote it. I got everything in there except for one thing. I'm gonna go back and push for that. And so we now have a video release policy. Within 72 hours, videos will be released. One of the other things that was very important to me was that we have to, when I say we, it's really DPD, has to try to notify that family before that video is released. Because you all have a police monitor that families are very important to me, and this might be controversial even in this room, but I don't care if your loved one just robbed the bank. What were they doing at the time they were killed is my question. So if their hands were up and whatever, and that might be controversial, but I don't celebrate the loss of any life, whether that be civilian or sworn. And so that was a human being, and they might have been in the middle of committing a crime or whatever, but we need to look at what happened when the use of force was going on. Because you didn't know that person was a convicted felon before you shot him. You didn't know anything about him. So getting into people's character and stuff to me is not, so that might be controversial, but our office, you know, we mourn the loss of all lives. So whether somebody was committing a crime or not, our office cares about what happened at the time that they were killed. Just 1 second. And so I say that, and so I don't celebrate officers being killed or human beings, like I said, if they were committing a crime or allegedly committing a crime. And so one of the things that I heard, because I had done this work in other cities, I came to you all from New Orleans, where I was the chief monitor over use of force. So I started that department in our office, our Office of Independent Oversight there, and built it. So all I did was spend all my time working with the police about force, and very tough. I went to every autopsy, just everything. I was very hands-on at every crime scene, there, right when it happened. So my phone rang at 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. I was there, and I brought those same things to Dallas. We go to every police shooting, everyone, and when the officer is involved. Yeah, because imagine if I couldn't go to every just police shooting. Because I would never get any sleep and get any work done. But any officer involved shooting or death in custody, you will see our little white car, Officer Community Police Oversight, we are there. So I remember one night, it was crazy, I think I literally got home, sat down for like an hour, my phone rang, I had to go right back out. So we will go to, whether it's a human loss or even a four-legged loss. So when I get calls about dog shootings by police, we go to every single thing when an officer has a gun. Discharge is a weapon.
I don't want to interrupt, but I get those calls too, in the middle of the night as well.
So, we are at the scene of everyone, and even if an officer accidentally discharges their weapon, whether they were at their house, at the police station, or whatever, we will, how they died, or whatever. So depending on what time we get the call, we sometimes make it to the scene, other times we're at the hospital, trying to figure out what's going on. So you have representation from the very beginning when stuff is happening on the ground. And that's very important because it's kind of hard to oversee stuff like after the fact. And so that was one of the issues that the police fought me on. They still fight me on it a lot. When I was in New Orleans, I literally was under the yellow tape, like on the officer's heels, like looking at the casings and stuff. In this jurisdiction, they kind of want to keep me at arm's bay. They kind of sometimes want to keep me out where the media is and stuff, but I managed to get up in there anyway and see what I need to see, because it's very important, because I can't verify if evidence was collected correctly or witnesses were talked to or something was canvassed if I'm not there. So it's very important for me to be there, so that's one of the things I'm going to push. But what I was talking about with the families and why it's important to have that piece in there about notifying is that one of the things I used to hear was that sometimes people wouldn't even know their loved one was killed until they like cut the news on. And I just feel like, that's why I said, I don't care whether your loved one was in the middle of a crime spree or whatever, it's still somebody's loved one, right? And so to just cut the TV on and find out that Susie Smith or Joe Blow was killed by the police is not really the way I would want to find out about my loved one. So they have to make a very, very strong effort to find this family, if the person has a family, of the person that was killed. And one of the things that we will also do for that family is we will show them the video. So my office hosts the video releases. So the family will come to my office. When City Hall was open, now City Hall is not really open, we will go to the police department. So I feel it's important for them to be in a neutral space. You're already upset, because remember, within 72 hours, find out your loved one is killed. And so it's very sensitive, and so our office co-hosts all of the showing to the family, and we will not only notify them, but if the family wants to see this video, we will show it to them before it's released to the public. And so that is very important for me, very emotional, as you can imagine, especially with a lot of times with people's parents, their mom, their dad, their sisters, their brothers, sometimes children have come. The other thing that was a big win for our office, in partnership with the board, was that I made the recommendation for it to be retroactive. So it's starting June 1st, going forward. But for families that had cases before that, if there was video, because remember, even though Dallas is huge, they have always had body-worn cameras and all of this, but if there is footage and the family's never been able to see it, they can make arrangements, they can call me, they can call Internal Affairs, and we will show them video footage. We won't release it to the public, to the news, but we will at least let the family be able to see it, because there are so many families that just don't have any clue what happened to their loved one, et cetera. So video footage exists, they can now see it. And so I'm really proud of that. Just a few more things, and then I see some of your brains turning. I also want to talk about our protest policy. So last year when all the protests were happening, remember, we're brand new, right? I came at the very end of February, these protests started in May, June, and people were still kind of like, who the officer was, that took the board, what? And so I was really upset because people weren't including us, my city colleagues, like in trying to figure out what to do with these protests. And people were like, well, Tonya, what would the office or the board be doing around protests? Like, what's your role in that? And I said, pretty much anytime, anywhere DPD is, we should have a role, right? So I talked to them about the importance of monitoring protests, about the importance of making sure that the police weren't violating people's rights. And so after many long conversations, and the chair and I talking to the city, people started realizing, oh my God, there really is a role for community oversight in policing. So I am proud to say that we probably were at our office, and the chair was right on my heels most of the time we were partnering together. We probably went
went to about 80% of the protests. Luckily, a lot of them were at City Hall, so that wasn't too hard for me to just go outside and follow them along. But, and one of the other things we did was, there used to be a legal observer program here in the city of Dallas. So for those of you that don't know what that is, that means it's either lawyers or law students could actually just come, you don't get involved in the protest, but you kind of observe to see if anybody's rights are being violated. So they hadn't done that in a long time, so we revived the legal observer policy. And so any organizer could call my office. We had a team of law students and lawyers that would dispatch a team of legal observers out to just make sure that nothing was happening with the protesters and things of that nature. And so one of the other things that I'll say about the protests is that, you know, Chief Hall and I didn't always see eye to eye on things. And one of the things that she and I had a lot of debate about was just, I think we can all understand using some force, right? If I pull out a pepper ball gun and shoot you in the face and all that, we can understand using force, right? I grab you, but people didn't understand showings of uses of force. So I'm like, if I come out there in full riot gear and we line up like 20 police officers across the protesters in full riot gear, they're not doing anything, that does not calm anybody down. And the police feel like, oh, well, we have to be at the ready and this and that. I say, but you're not de-escalating. To me, that escalates because the crowd is just there. They don't know what they're gonna do or not do. It doesn't help anybody. And we had to have a lot of conversations about just showing of force. So one of the things I'm very proud of is that towards the end, if any of you came to any protest, you would barely even see these people. Like they were there, don't get me wrong, they were there. A lot of times they might have had Air One, the helicopter, or they might have been like a block away. Like they were really trying to give the protesters, the peaceful protesters, their space and stuff. And that has to do with this office and this board really pushing to let people have their freedom of speech that's uninhibited. And so that's another victory of our office. Just another thing I'll say in terms of complaints is that you all have this now, this little brochure, and it just very detailed, tells you everything about how to file a complaint. And we even bought some complaint forms. So one of the things I'm very proud of too is this is like our old complaint form. And so you can fill this out, and somebody actually already turned in a complaint, so if any of you guys have complaints tonight, you can bring them to me. But we actually revamped our complaint form, so you go to our website, which is in here, or the board's website, you can actually, the form that's on there now, you can actually fill it out on your phone. And so it makes it very easy, because this was a PDF, some people couldn't open a PDF, you had to resave it, you had to do all these things, it was we had a form, but it wasn't user-friendly. So now you can actually do it on your phone, and all of that, so we've made it easy for people to be able to file a complaint. And so I'm really, proud of that. And so one of the things that I wanted to just tell you guys the 4 ways your complaint will get handled. So there's 4 little buckets that complaints come in. So if you file a complaint, I'm just gonna pick on Josh. Josh works with my office. If Josh files a complaint and there's no policy violation, maybe the police department right now has a policy of 60 days. I disagree with that policy, but that's a longer fight. But right now, you're supposed to file a complaint within 60 days of the incident. I don't think that's reasonable. I know why they do it, because of right now, as you can imagine, with the 9th largest police department in the country, storing video footage is extremely expensive. Remember, every officer that has a camera has to come in at the end of his or her shift, download it and dock it. And so they only keep video footage for 90 days. Unless it's like a, really big case, like maybe a homicide or robbery, a case that's going to trial, or somebody files a complaint. If not, it only stays for 90 days. So that's why they make the complaint 60 days. So that way, if you file a complaint, they can pretty much make sure that they can go in and get any footage if it exists. I still think 60 days is not enough time for people to file a complaint. So that's a longer discussion. But so if there's no policy violation, sometimes you'd be surprised you get complaints that don't have anything to do with DPD. People complain on Dart, Garland, Fort Worth, whatever. It'll be called an NI, no investigation, right? That's kind of makes sense. There's nothing to investigate. Another thing that might happen is something called a division referral. So depending on what the case is, a division referral means it'll go back to the division.
So it'll go back to the, district where it came from, and the supervisor of the officer, so it'll only be a sergeant or a lieutenant or higher, will review the incident and try to get to the bottom of what happened between the civilian and the officer. And they will do the investigation at the substation level. When they're very serious cases, like use of the force, allegations of theft, because we've had people that say, you know, when I got pulled over, you know, I had $500 on me, but they only wrote down $300 or something like that. That happens all the time, allegations of theft and all that type of stuff. Internal affairs will keep it. And so sometimes internal affairs will keep a complaint depending on just what the nature of it is, and also if it has anything to do with race. So somebody says, I feel like the officer discriminated against me because I was black, or I was Asian, or whatever the situation is, anything that has to do with kind of either racial disparities or anything like that, internal affairs will also keep that. And then the last one that I'm gonna be hopefully bringing to you all next spring is mediation. So you all will get a chance, if you file a complaint, to actually sit across from the officer and talk about what happened. Now, I'm under no illusion that everybody gonna leave this singing Kumbaya. That's not the point of it. The point of it is for the officer to be able to hear from you, and you be able to hear from the officer, and maybe there'll be some meeting in the minds, maybe there won't. But, so there will be a mediation program, and our office is tasked with building that. And so I'm gonna be hiring a mediation manager, hopefully in the next month, that will help me build that program, and so that will be an opportunity. And it will only be for lower level complaints. Like, I'm not gonna mitigate a use of force, you know what I mean, or something of that nature, or criminal allegations. So it'll be lower level complaints, but you will have a chance to sit across from officers and talk about them. So I ain't gonna stop talking, because the chair and I, we got so much stuff going on, that we could talk to you all forever, but I know you got a lot of questions, and we also wanna hear some of your recommendations, so I saw a hand right there.
So, with your last statement, you had mentioned where police officers are criminals, lost my train of thought, but in that process, with the investigation piece, are they, the complaints that come through, are the investigators actually looking at the prior history of that police officer, or are they just looking at that case that is, you know, some of the complaints?
Now, that one's a little hard, because, I am not sure how, and I think every district does it differently. When you're talking about at the substation, and that's a really good question, because I do think looking at patterns is important, and the same thing with internal affairs. What I normally have seen, from investigations that have been concluded, I've never really seen them talk about somebody's, prior history, so my answer to that is probably no, but that is my concern too, is that I want them to start looking at patterns and practices, because there are some officers that I wouldn't be surprised, like when a complaint comes across my desk, I'm not surprised that this officer had this complaint. And so I do think that so one of the things that they are supposed to be doing, they're in the process of hiring a company to put something in place called an early warning system. So this is supposed to flag supervisors when they're having problem officers. And I just want to be, you know, like I said, as the chair says, oversight is really neutral. So we're really technically not pro-police or anti-police. We just want them to be better, because the better they are, the better it is for you, right? So sometimes the officers, doesn't mean that they're just rogue and just crazy. I mean, maybe they're going through a divorce. You know, maybe their wife got diagnosed with cancer, you know what I mean? And so maybe they started drinking, or, you know, I mean, so they're human beings too. So just because an officer might be, you know, showing up late or doing whatever, doesn't necessarily always mean that they just, you know, ready to shoot somebody or tase somebody. But the early warning system is supposed to, and I really hope I can work with them on it, because sometimes it'll miss indicators of problems, depending on what, you know, what the data is supposed to kind of query and tell you. If it doesn't query and tell you the right thing, sometimes officers still slide underneath the radar screen, and you don't really know they're having problems. But they are looking into getting an early warning system to try to help supervisors, to try to catch officers early on if they're having problems.
Following up on her question though, if you're getting the complaint into your office, you're getting a complaint on this same officer over and over. Is that not something you would red flag?
We can, so that's one of the things that we have to do. So
as the chair said, and I always want to put this out here in transparency, because I want people to be very clear, because I always get concerned that people don't get clear. And so the chair said, and I'm gonna re-say it. At this point in time, I can't do any independent investigation until DPD has concluded their investigation. But we sit together every Wednesday. So all the complaints that come into my office and all the complaints that come into them, we sit together every week and look at all of them together as kind of a team. So internal affairs in my office, and we decide what happens. A lot of times I don't agree with what happens, and then I'll be like, okay, well that's fine. And at the moment I don't agree, I can just launch an independent investigation. But right now, I don't like that process, but they have to touch it pretty much before I can touch it. And so I want the community to be clear, because I know depending on where you sit, there's a lot of fear of retaliation. And I had a concern that people didn't know that we had to turn those complaints over. So I'm putting it out, and I'm hoping to write some material to let people know that. But if you do send a complaint to us, it is going to DPD. But I'm in the room when we're talking about it, but I know that's been a concern. And so we've had some people actually decide they didn't want to do it. They were like, we thought you were just going to be able to do it and take it. I'm afraid, I'm worried about retribution. And so I feel bad, because I've actually had long conversations with civilians. And at the end of the day, when they realized that I had turned this over to DPD, they didn't want to do it.
But the answer to your question was your answer? That
Yes,
if
so
you
that's
get
what I'm starting with.
and you get several complaints about the same officer.
Yep.
Is there something that you will be doing to flag that officer or not?
Yes, so that's very new. Remember, we're still new and growing. So it's funny, Josh Brown, he is a law student, worked with us this summer. And that's one of the projects we're trying to start to build. And I'm also working with our data team in the city is starting to put together a database where we can start to flag problem officers. So it's in the early stages, but that is in the mindset. We are actually working on it. But I do want to start to be able to have conversations with Chief Garcia and his executive team when I'm starting to see problem officers.
I have one more question. How has that been received, the fact that you are so concerned that no matter what they did, they should still be looked at as a human being who was just killed? Because that seems like that would be contrary to perhaps what the police department would say. This is a criminal.
Yeah.
We shot him 27 times. Don't worry about that. He was a criminal. He should die.
Yes. So that's how the conversations go. Just like I'm like, oh, he was committing crime. He was on a crime spree. I was like, but what was he or she doing at the moment that they were killed? And to be honest with you, sometimes that's controversial in the community. Like some people look at me and be like, you know, Junior was off the chain, and you know, he shot it out with the police, and sometimes there ain't no sympathy even from the community from my viewpoint about, well, Junior was somebody's loved one, right? And so we still need to look at it. So it cuts both ways in a way. So definitely controversial a lot of times with the police department when I'm trying to talk to them about, let's just stick to the facts, what happened, and then sometimes in the community we're like, well, he or she was a problem. And so they would, you know, they always doing stuff with the police and stuff, so it kind of cuts both ways sometimes with the police and the community.
I understand that my friend said it was George Floyd. Well, he was a criminal.
Yep.
If I can though, it's really interesting, just going back to what you just said about the patterns for police officers, because they don't want to look at that. There are police officers that have hundreds of use of force complaints. And so when it comes up to some of these incidents, and then there's that question, right, is this a pattern or something like that? No, we gotta look at the incident. Okay, but you want to say like this person who was shot, the civilian, oh, we'll use a criminal, he was a drug dealer, whatever else. It's like, okay, if we're gonna use the like background and trends and patterns for one, we should use it for both. Because that's how we want to understand it, so it's use equal criteria.
And that's very important to me, because that's exactly what will happen. I'm like, but you want to break down his or her whole criminal record, right? From if they had one at juvenile, you want to talk about what they were doing at 14, now they 30, right? But then you don't want to turn the table and say, okay, but Officer Smith has had like 5 or 6 complaints, or, you know, 4 or 5 uses of force every time they pull somebody over the traffic stop. There's definitely a lot of resistance to that. But they always want to run down like somebody's jacket, right? Whoever the civilian was.
This is kind of off of what we're talking about, but I'm just curious about something. What do you think the, future for qualified immunity is? What do you think its future is?
So that is, you know what? Qualified immunity, honestly, that's determined by who is in the state legislature. If you have a state legislature that's built of a group of individuals, the majority vote feel so they should get rid of qualified immunity, then get rid of it. The state legislature that we have right now is not gonna do that. And that's because of the fact that we don't vote. When I say we, I'm not just talking about black people, I'm talking about Texans just don't vote in state elections in large numbers. And so when you don't vote in those elections, yeah, you know, it's almost inevitable that change is not gonna happen. So if we wanna get rid of qualified immunity, we need to do what it takes to get rid of qualified immunity. And that means that we need to make sure that we're electing state legislatures that don't want to uphold qualified immunity. That's the only way we're gonna get rid of it. I mean, that's the honest truth, man. That's all I can tell you. Any other questions?
Well, what about comments? We wanna hear recommendations to thoughts, like what things are y'all seeing happening in District 3 that are either good or bad? Like, you like when the police are doing this, you want them to see do more of it, or you have concern about it? You know, this is your representative right here, so, so talk to us a little bit about what you all are seeing in the district.
That's perfect. Your representative is also the chair, so.
There you go.
So.
I'm in Casey Thomas's district, and I would like to see more police, active police up there. Where I live, unfortunately, is where that little boy was killed, that 4-year-old boy. And we found his body was less than 30 yards from my house.
Oh,
So I still have an issue driving down that street. I have a daughter from that. And I need to see more police in that area. That should not have happened in my neighborhood, I'm sorry.
So you're feeling like her, when she said you feeling kind of under police, like there's not enough of a presence.
Not just under police. I live in the same neighborhood. I live 8 houses down from that board.
What neighborhood is it?
In the woods.
In the woods.
And our alleys, there are no lights. You can't see down. You can't see past one house in our alley. And part of the budgets for 2018, 19, and 20 were increased lighting in the neighborhood. No, nobody, I don't know where this occurred, but it was in our budget. And you said, what would you like to see in your neighborhood? Number one, more police, more lights.
More lights,
I mean, we have 2 police officers for our whole entire neighborhood, from 20 all the way down, around, up to Illinois River almost. 2 officers, and they're not on at the same time. One in the morning, one at night. And they're not cruising the neighborhood. They're parked at the library or somewhere else.
Yes.
I have a question. Is y'all doing community policing?
They actually have community police officers.
And our community police officer told me the reason I'm afraid is my own fault. And that's what my community police officer told me.
He said it again?
She told me that the reason I'm afraid is my own fault.
What does that mean?
I did. She said, I'm afraid, not because of lack of action by them, but because of basically inferring that I'm weak. Because I was afraid they'd interfere. And I have not been even when they came out to our community to speak that night,
Yes.
it was very patronizing to us.
Yes.
They didn't come with any facts about what had just occurred.
Right.
It was just speech. Shut up, listen to us, we're sorry, have a good night.
I'm the one that asked about them putting a storefront, that was me, I'm the one.
And we as citizens
Yes.
have had to go, there is a library, a community rec center like this, and a fire station, all within 3 blocks of where that baby was.
Yes.
That all the police could use as a station, a substation. And the city owns those buildings. And for 30 years, we have been asking, I grew up in Duncanville, which is right next door, so I remember this whole conversation. We've been asking for more police in that neighborhood. We have more people in that neighborhood than the city of Duncanville has, and they have 15 police officers. actually two, one morning, one night.
And please, you know, when you hear about those, invite us to those meetings. I mean, one of the things that we still have a problem with is communication with the police department. And so, you know, we would love to come, and if nothing else, at least just be a fly on the wall and observe for ourselves how the officers are interacting with you. And
You can still see it, it's on YouTube, they videotape it, put it on YouTube.
Because it was a big meeting, were you guys notified about the meeting?
No.
Casey Thomas called it. So,
Are you talking about the press conference?
no, it wasn't a press conference, it was a community meeting for healing.
No.
Casey Thomas called it to help heal the community. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very, well, I found out about like the after the fact.
Well, if you wanna watch it, so you can get some information as to how the police dealt with us, it's on YouTube, like I said.
Okay.
They didn't tell anybody that spoke out at the meeting that was gonna happen, but they put it on free YouTube.
I just want to say that, you know, that is unacceptable. I apologize. And I think at the end of the day, it's not that complex what people want. You want your community to be safe.
Yeah.
You want, if you need police to arrive in a reasonable amount of time, and you don't want them killing your children. I think it's those three things.
It's not a lot to ask, is it? I mean,
That's not a lot to ask.
we're not asking for new roads or something.
Young man right there, you had a hand up for a minute.
Since I'm gonna say it just like I mean it from my heart, my stupid governor has opened us with this no license to carry. Now, with this coming into place, what does the police of Dallas training has changed to adapt to that? Because now everybody out there gonna have a gun, and we don't. And I don't wanna get shot, so to be honest with you, I don't even carry my gun now because I don't want the person to say he had a gun on me and stuff. So are the police get any special type of training for this type of procedure going forward?
You know, that's a good question, and I meet with Chief Garcia once a month, every second Tuesday, and I did bring that up to him. What was that back? That was back in June, I believe. I brought that up to him. Director, do you know if there's been any training? Because I know he said that at that point there had not been any additional training, but it's something that they have to look into because of the fact that, again, it's going to be legal for open carry.
Yeah.
Meaning you decide to walk around with your handgun and a holster on your hip like you Don C. You know, the police cannot do anything to you, according to, and so I don't know. You know, I know I was talking to a friend of mine that lives in Oklahoma. They have open carry in Oklahoma. They do. And they have it in quite a few other states. But, you know, Oklahoma, they're not shooting like they are here in Texas. So, you know, I'm very concerned too.
The reason they're not shooting in Oklahoma like they are here is because Oklahoma just always had open carry. The reason crime is so bad in Texas and Chicago and places like that is because of permits. The criminals have got guns. They always have had them.
But I don't want the police to shoot me because now I got it.
Well,
Assuming that you want to back.
okay, I just don't think, I'm sure there's gonna be some growing pains, but I just don't think a lot of people gonna get shot simply because they have a gun. Most people get shot by the police or Joe Smith, the citizen, because of their action.
But I think this question is about being shot by the police.
Well, what I'm saying is, you know, everything, to me, it's gonna be about how you carry yourself and how you respond.
But you gotta keep in mind, we've been shot for carrying skills, we've been shot for carrying bombs, we've been shot for not carrying anything. So now I'm saying that we're not gonna get shot for holding a gun? I mean,
No, I'm not saying
that's
that you're not gonna get shot, but what I'm saying is to minimize the opportunity to get shot, you have to carry yourself in a certain way.
Conversation is more about the police oversight. And so I get what you're saying.
Listen,
You don't have
I'm
to-
not responsible for the police, I'm responsible for me.
I know, but this is about the police.
I understand this, but every everybody's feel about the gun, but let's feel about the
But,
police.
let's hold, guys, hold on. Now, let's bring it back. His question, he was concerned about police training for him carrying a gun. He was not, this question was not about.
They're working on that legislation too. They're working on that. They're working on they're trying to get a body together to come up with training for police when they stop somebody doing open carry.
So this is
I mean,
when
but I
the
guess-
law goes into effect September 1st, which means it's coming up pretty soon.
I doubt it.
I mean, but
I doubt it.
How they gonna get that training that quick?
I don't think they are.
I mean, I understand what he's saying, but I guess my concern is that there have been a lot of people, just historically, that have carried themselves to me in ways that were not threatening and still ended up being threatening. So, I think purporting yourself in a certain way is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, I think that, the onus really is on the police. The police have all the specialized training, so like, if I come over to you right now and cuss you out, and then we start fighting it out, that might make sense, right? We don't have specialized training, but if you're Officer Jones, I should be able to get in your face right now, cuss you out from here to bottom, and you be able to hold your composure, get it together, try to de-escalate. Now, am I saying my behavior is right?
No,
I'm not saying I think that's.
Carrying a gun if you couldn't.
And I agree with you, and I agree with you. I really agree with you, but I'm gonna go back to something you said earlier, you know, the wife might have cancer, the dog that died, they could have left with the truck, they humans too.
They don't need to be a police officer.
That's right.
They don't need to.
But they human, they got stopped by the police.
But
That
they do
human,
that every day.
this is the thing though, that human that was shot by a police officer committing a crime, he was committing a crime, and guess what?
But he's human too.
Oh. Yes, yes, he is human. That police officer is not gonna be tried if he's not going to jail for killing that person for committing a crime. But guess what happens? Police officers are going to jail for shooting people who weren't committing a crime. So that is an issue. That is an issue, meaning that no, whether you have a bad day or not, because of the fact that, hey, I have bad days at work. I have days that I don't want to go to work. But you know what? I'm not a police officer. If you're a police officer, you got a bad day. That does not change the fact you have the power to take someone's life. I don't care how bad your day is.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I honestly wholeheartedly agree with you. But I think all of us have to look at the issue from both sides. You have to frame your own frame of mind. When I talk to my kid about going out the door, what I'm talking to my daughter about is her coming back to me.
Right? Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
So that gives us a plug for, we're gonna be doing a Know Your Rights program. And it's really, I feel really as a black woman, those kind of programs are hard because a lot of our communities already have to swallow a lot on a daily basis. And a lot of those are gonna be doing just what you said, telling your daughter, this ain't the time for you to be arguing with Officer Jones, because you're not gonna win that fight on the side of the road. You're gonna have to just suck it up, they can just be talking to you crazy, using the N-word, doing whatever, and suck it up. Even though you have the right to not have to endure that, because we want you to be able to come home right and file that claim. I mean, so it's so complicated. Because so many of us on a daily basis already gotta swallow a whole bunch of injustice, right? So then to have to do it again when some officers off the chain is really hard. But I agree that the goal is to have everybody be able to come on home.
Go back home.
One thing,
And then go downtown and file your complaint.
There you go.
I hate to say we got a hard stop at 8:30. We gotta get out of here. If you have questions in the back and people are getting themselves together.
I just wanted to ask, is there anything in place in terms of psychological evaluation for the police officers, coming in or ongoing, like yearly, that they go and be evaluated?
That's a great question. So, coming in, there is supposed to be psychological evaluation, but your last point has recently come up. And, you know, people are starting to think about, shouldn't officers have to have like a yearly, like, kind of welfare check? Like yearly, we need to check in, to make sure your mental health is still going on. So that is really important.
They got parents, they got kids, they got things that they have to do in their life, so, and if you're an adult, you took the job to be a police officer, so on you in that sense that he shows this. So we need you to be in a mental state on a regular basis, and that should be important to you. And so it should be important to all those people that are in that position to make sure you can have something.
So I'm so glad you raised that, because that's definitely moving now, be like, shouldn't we be having like annual assessment of our officers?
Is that the same as male police? Because we have a lot of that going on, people don't have.
That's true, well,
So,
that, hopefully that would be
are
fine.
those two connected or
Yes.
the same? Because that is really popular right now, that trend, mental illness, it's like, it's crazy. It's really crazy.
And that is becoming a question when people are starting to see officers, especially ones that repeat offenders, so people are starting to say, well, how did they get there in the first place? Like, who's watching them, who's assessing them, like, what's going on with them, that we're starting to see problematic officers, so that's a very important point about what is the assessment we're doing, not only just like physically, but mental health assessments.
Thank you, everyone. We hate to end so abruptly. Conversation's been so great. We have to do this again.